This is supposed to be a video about the Lakers, how the free agency reshapes their identity and how they can move forward. But after the Hawks traded away the former #1 overall pick in Zachary Ricochet 2 seasons after him being drafted, I then decided to pivot to the Atlanta Hawks because I think they're secretly having one of the best off seasons in the entire NBA. Obviously, the big move that sparked these smaller marginal moves, in air quotes obviously, later on is the Trae Young salary dump for CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. Yeah, Trae is probably more offensively talented than both of those two combined, but the amount of touches and, let's just be real, money CJ demands is way less than Trae Young. Plus, CJ is a bit more efficient while being a more presentable presence on that defensive end. And I mean, speaking of that defensive end, man, post Trae Young, the Hawks definitely honed in on that side of the ball to make sure they never make that same mistake ever again. Of course, they brought in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which ended up being a golden signing in the first season they had him. But they also already had guys like Dyson Daniels and Zachary Ricochet. Oh yeah, let's just go back to Ricochet since I've already brought him up a couple times. They recently moved off of him while acquiring another player from OKC and Luguentz Dort. Dort's three-point shot was very mediocre and unreliable, and I think he also looked a little bit gassed too early inside Spurs series. But let's just be honest and not overthink it. Dort's an elite defender having an incredible mix of elite core strength, use of contact, and hands that all combine to make him the absolute bulldog that he's known for being. I mentioned Lu Dort is actually the second player Atlanta gave up second rounders for from OKC, and that's because they also picked up Aaron Wiggins. I was a bit confused with them picking up Wiggins if they were going to re-sign Kuminga, but they seemingly are opting to not do so. Even without Kuminga's athleticism, length, and tenacious energy on that side of the ball, they have already picked up guys that can stack and stack and stack upon each other until you have another Eastern Conference team who will have cutthroat defensive units. Even when you just look at their guard situation, they went from just having CJ and Naw in that backcourt and even being forced to play dice at the position occasionally, to now adding Ryan Nembhard in that Ricochet deal, as well as picking up Devin Carter, one of the fastest guards in the NBA. And I want you to note that everything I said up until now has not even been accounting for their draft selections, in which they picked up even more backcourt help and guys who are going to display tenacious defense. I think a good portion had Dave Mara heading to Atlanta in their mock drafts, but they opted to select Kingston Flemings, another insanely quick guard with good hands and defensive intensity, while already being an incredible playmaker. They controversially selected Zuby Ejiofor later in the first round, but I'm actually kind of a fan of the selection since he's another high-energy guy who can also generate turnovers a bit. Trading for Vassar deep in the second round wasn't a big move, but if you plan on re-signing Jock Landau, who kind of plays that same such big role, then don't even draft him unless you want to just send him to the G League and let him develop there. When you look at the 2026 playoffs in retrospection, the Hawks' switch-heavy collective defensive approach gave the Knicks the most trouble in the playoffs. They had good ball movement and defensive possessions, but their lack of A-list star power, rim protection, depth, and offensive versatility did end up being their demise. Do I think they fixed their weaknesses? Well, adding a lottery pick, a ton of under-the-radar guards, and defensive versatile bulldogs do definitely fix that depth, but they didn't add any threatening front-court defense, rim protection, or any bigger names to surround Jalen Johnson. However, when we look at their contracts, they start to all make a little bit more sense. That Corey Kispert contract they acquired in the Trae Young deal, the amount of money Jock Landale was signed for, as well as having a one-year contract with CJ, it implies that there's a big move coming for Atlanta at the deadline if it presents itself, where it's elite ball handling while giving up a Devin Carter or CJ McCollum, or a two-way big who can be considered an all-star at the expense of Jock Landale and other contracts. It's unclear, but I think Atlanta is in the pursuit of a bigger name. When I say that there's an opportunity that may present itself, I'm obviously aware that they gave up a good amount of second-round picks, but that does not account for the fact that they have still a good amount of first-round picks, as well as versatile contracts that can stack up upon each other for any move that presents itself or any move that they wish to make. Don't get me wrong and think I believe this is the best or the biggest offseason at all, but if you round out a roster with depth, positional freedom, cohesion, and a collective defensive stranglehold, I'd say you definitely have a place within the deeper Eastern Conference this upcoming season just by dominating the margins.
Picked off by Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Going in on McCain. Behind the back, Jalen Johnson.
And great
couldn't